week on Quality Digest Live, we chat with Randy Dougherty of ANAB about accreditation and conformity assessment bodies.
Also, just how big of a problem are counterfeit parts to the Department of Defense? We'll find out all about that and more when we come back.
Welcome back to Quality Digest Live for February 1st, 2013. QDL is your weekly look at who and what is making the news in the world of quality. I'm Mike Richmond, publisher of Quality Digest.
And I'm Quality Digest Editor-in-Chief, Dirk Ducharme. Have you ever wondered if there isn't maybe a better way for airlines to board passengers onto a plane?
All the time.
For all of those of you who travel a lot, you've probably wondered that. What's better? Do you go front to back? Do you go back to front? Does anybody even bother looking at it? Because it seems like no matter how it works, it always seems to get so congested. Well, one of our frequent contributors, Bill Levinson, looked at this problem in his article, Eliminate Muda from Aircraft Boarding. Bill describes a study done by astrophysicist John Stephan that looks at various methods for boarding a plane and along with Stephan's own suggestions on what he believes might work best. Now, it's pretty obvious with the problem with boarding a plane if you board from front to back. Obviously, the people, if they're in front of you and you come up behind them, the people in front of you are trying to stow their luggage. Meanwhile, you have to get past them to get to your seat, which is further back in the plane. Obviously, that doesn't work. We all know that. But back to front is also another method that's used, and that is better, but it's still really not optimal. And Stephan points out another method, which is called the Wilma method, which boards window seats first. Now, this isn't Stephan's method, but if you're not familiar with the Wilma method, you've probably heard of it. But the idea behind that one is let the people with window seats board first, because that way they can get their luggage stowed. They get in and sit. Yeah. Now the aisle seats and the middle seat are free for those people, and you don't have to step over the person that's in the aisle seat in order to get to your window seat. So that speeds things up a little bit more.
Makes sense.
But Stephan's method has people boarding from the rear, which we know is good, windows first, like the Wilma method, which we know is also good, but in alternate rows. So from the back, window seats first, but not, let's say, not row 21, 20, 19. Yeah. It might be 21, 19, 17, sure. 15. The idea being that when you board from alternate rows and windows first, nobody's going to get into each other's way. They have plenty of elbow room. They have room to kind of jockey back and forth in the luggage bins and so forth. Now, this sounds like this was actually, I believe, computer modeled, but then to test his theory, Stephan's actually used a mock-up of a Boeing 757 and 72 volunteers. So what were the results? Well, block boarding, which is kind of a standard way of boarding, front to back, took an average of 6 minutes, 54 seconds. Okay. Random boarding, and that is just for a free-for-all. Basically, you have your seat, you just get on the plane when you can.
Right.
That was actually a little bit better, surprisingly, 5 minutes and 45 seconds. The Wilma method, remember that's windows first, took 4 minutes and 13 seconds. And the Stephan method, starting from the back, windows first, alternate rows, took 3 minutes and 36 seconds. So about half the time as it took with a standard block boarding.
Somewhere Frederick Winslow Taylor is smiling.
He's smiling. He said, finally, you guys are listening to me. There are links, several links in the news story referenced in the Levinson article, as well as a link to a video showing the experiment in action. So this is kind of what Levinson points out. He says, there's Muda all around us, and he travels a lot, and so very often he kind of reports on what he sees with the airlines, and this is just a classic example of this is the way we've always done it, and so this should be the way we do it. Now, there was a reader who said, look, all this doesn't make any difference, because here's a problem. Here's why it won't work, says, this was from Lane Builder. This was a comment on the article on our website. First, the airlines have made checking bags so financially punishing that everyone who tries to carry anything on, everyone tries to carry on anything and everything. Add the fact that there is nothing to stop those from getting on the plane from dumping their bags off anywhere, and they do. Delta tried this, and it became extremely frustrating when you got to your seat and the overhead bins were full, and all those who got on first were lounging with their feet stretched out, and nothing under their seats. So this reader says, you know, it doesn't matter how you board. The fact is the people who get on first are going to take up the luggage bins, and you're going to be dashing around trying to find a place to stick your luggage anyway. So.
Good point, though, about the financial punishment of checking bags, because, yeah, I know I would hate to check a bag. I never check a bag if I don't have to.
Yeah, if I can save $25, I'm going to do it.
Yeah, sure. I mean, or more. And right. Yeah, I mean, bring it on. And sure, I've done that. If I board first, I won't put anything underneath my feet if I don't have to. I put them all up top. So. Hey, it's a good piece. Thank you for Bill for giving that to us. Okay, another news item that caught our eye this week comes from Wiley, the well-known book publisher. One of Wiley's news releases, which actually will not officially hit the market until next month, is titled "Doing More with Teams." It was written by Bruce Piasecki, who talked about his new book in a recent article. This piece, titled "Shining a Light on the Dark Side of Teams," appeared in Tuesday's issue of Quality Digest Daily. Now, it's common to celebrate the positive aspects of teamwork. We do it all the time. But Piasecki's article and his book talked about the dangers of teams. And there are lessons here that business professionals can learn from. And one key example comes from the world of sports. Piasecki points to the saga of champion cyclist Lance Armstrong as an example of how teams can be poisonous. Armstrong was and is, I would say, without any doubt, a highly arrogant individual who went to great and apparently illegal lengths to ensure victory at all costs. His doping regimen was not only a personal matter. As the undisputed leader of his team, not to mention a record-breaking athlete, his choices influenced his teammates, many of whom doped as well. It was a rotten culture. It was driven by its top performer and supported by everyone else. Not so unfamiliar to many of us out there in the business world. Right. And business cultures can fall victim to the same syndrome. Leaders and those with great natural ability can be coddled by teams. Prima donna behavior is almost always tolerated and sometimes it's even actually encouraged. Winning and successful team members, however you define that, aren't absolved from the responsibility to act ethically, to consider others, to be humble, and to put forth consistently high levels of effort. In fact, it could be argued that the most gifted of team members have a greater responsibility, I think, to model appropriate behavior. As President John F. Kennedy once said, "To those whom much is given, much is expected." I agree with that statement. I'm sure that Bruce Piasecki would as well. So you can look for his book, Doing More with Teams, coming out next month from Wiley. And you can check out the story and find out the information about the book on the story links just below the player page right there. In fact, story links for all the pieces we're going to be covering on the show, you can find right down there as well.
That's right. Okay, well, on to our our only interview today. We have one interview today. If your company has been registered to ISO 9001, you have most likely worked with a certification body, often called a registrar. The majority of registrars are themselves audited, checked out by an accreditation body. In the United States, this is the ANSI-ASQ National Accreditation Board, or the ANAB, or ANAB, as some people call it. ANAB is the accreditation body for management systems certification and an accreditation body as well for laboratories, inspection bodies, reference material producers, and proficiency testing providers under the A-class brand. So what does the NAAB do? And why should we care? Well, today we are pleased to have on our show Randy Dougherty, Vice President of the NAAB. Hello, Randy. How are you this morning?
Morning. Thank you.
So, Randy, first of all, before we get started, tell us what an accreditation body actually is. You know, what do they do? So what is ANAB's function?
ANAB's function is to evaluate certification bodies and make sure that they conform to the international standards, of which some of the key requirements relate to both competence and impartiality.
Okay, and why should we care? I mean, I would say most registrars, most certification bodies, well, not all, but certainly probably 95 or 99% of them are accredited, both here in the United States and in Europe as well. Why should we care? Why does it matter if my accreditation body is accredited to the NAAB?
Well, a couple of reasons. First, informed purchasers likely are not going to accept an unaccredited certificate. And I'm thinking of sectors like the automotive industry, the aerospace sector, the telecommunications sector. They're going to look for a certification to be from a certification body that is accredited.
So, go ahead.
Second, if if you're going to get certified, you want that certificate recognized internationally. So working with an accreditation body that is an IAF MLA signatory is going to give you that international recognition also.
Okay, so what you've kind of spoken of right there, it seemed to me kind of more, for lack of a better term, let's say marketing reasons. If I want to, if I need to get into a certain market, or if I need to have certain customers who are requiring an accredited, that my certificate comes from an accredited certification body or registrar, then I'm going to have to go to one of those. So those are kind of marketing reasons. But aside from that, what do I actually get out of it? And I guess the point I want to, get to here is we've had a couple of articles in the last month or so that have been critical, if not of accreditation, have been critical certainly of certification bodies. So as a customer of a registration, of a certification body, let's say Quality Digest gets registered to ISO 9000. Or we want to. And so we jump through all the hoops, we pay our registrar sends an auditor out. Our first audit, the auditor finds some nonconformances. And we believe, as a company, that those nonconformances have nothing to do with reality. We think either the nonconformances just don't make sense, or we don't believe that they really address what ISO 9001 requirements are. So we complain to the registrar. And we say, Mr. Registrar, we think your auditor is out to lunch. What are you going to do to it? What are you going to do about it? And let's say the registrar supports the audit findings. And they say, no, Dirk Ducharme at Quality Digest, our auditor stands, and we and our auditor stand by what was found. You're going to have to fix that nonconformance, or we are not going to issue a ISO 9001 certificate. So at that point, do I have an option? Can I go to the NAAB and complain?
Yeah, you can. You get a couple of benefits by working with an accredited certification body. First, if the CB is accredited, they have to conform with ISO 17021, the international standard that applies to the CB, which means they have to have a documented complaint and appeals process where your complaint or appeal would be heard by people within the certification body that are knowledgeable but not directly involved in the dispute you have, so that they can make an unbiased decision. But if you're unhappy following that, yes, you could make the complaint to ANAB. And in fact, we've made it fairly easy for people to file a complaint. You can do it directly from our website.
And what would the ANAB, I'm sorry, it's easier for me to say ANAB. What would ANAB do? What would ANAB do in that case? Do they go to the registrar, or do they act as an intermediary? I mean, do you have any power, so to speak, over the certification body?
Well, yeah, we have the same kind of power over a certification body that the certification body would have over you. If the certification body doesn't conform to requirements, then they could lose their accreditation. The process we use is we would look at your complaint and we would assign it to an investigator. Now, the investigation is going to vary depending on what the complaint is, but it could include us going to the certification body's offices again. It could include us coming along on the next audit that they do with you, trying to find out what the issue is and make a decision. So, yeah, we try to actually provide confidence to you that your complaint's been heard. We understand your complaint, but then we make a decision about what we think the actual valid answer is. Sometimes we're going to support the CBs. Sometimes we're going to support you.
And Randy, I had a quick question that just kind of came to me, and I don't want to spring it on you, but what the heck, we got you, so I will. Who interprets language? You know, sometimes a standard or a directive may be written in such a way that there's some latitude in terms of interpreting that, and maybe a customer may interpret it one way and a registrar may interpret it another. Like, for instance, we had a recent article that Dirk referenced earlier where the language state of the art was in a directive, and there's some varying interpretations about, well, I think I'm state of the art, and maybe the registrar may say, well, no, you're not. So who interprets something like that? That might be a language question.
Well, if it's a straight interpretation of the standard, we'd go back to the standards body and ask them to clarify the language if what you're asking for is a straight interpretation of what does the standard say. If the issue is one where you don't agree with how somebody's applying the words of the standard, because there are a lot of disputes where you can have difference of opinion and the words of the standard will support either party's application of the words, if you will. In that case, you could go to the International Accreditation Forum Technical Committee and you could ask them to give a consensus opinion of how that wording should be applied.
Okay, and, Randy. Well, we're kind of running out of time here, but just to recap, this is kind of what I got from this, and feel free to tag on here at the end. So it sounds like you're saying that the value of an accreditation body in terms of what the client gets from it is, number one, their certificate, if it comes from an accredited registrar or certification body, is going to have more widespread acceptance, both here in the United States within their customers, and of course internationally, and also that you have some place to go if you disagree with your certification body with their findings. You have somebody above them that you can go to in order to dispute any findings. Is there any other advantage to accreditation?
Well, I think you hit a couple of the key ones that would affect an organization that's being certified. I think those are probably the key points.
Okay. Well, Randy, thank you for joining us this morning, your afternoon. We appreciate you being on. Once again, I believe you said that there is, if you do have a dispute, just since we were talking about this, I believe I did see there was a link on your website where there's actually a form you fill out if you have some sort of dispute. Is that right?
Yep, that's correct. And once the thing is entered into the system, we have to deal with it. So you can have confidence that if you do file that complaint, there is going to be action on it.
Okay. Well, thank you. That was Randy Dougherty, Vice President of the ANAB. Randy, thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
Thanks, Randy. Yeah, good stuff there. Randy Dougherty, good guy and a high-profile guy. Yeah.
And this actually brings up a good point. It's been said before, you don't necessarily have to take your registrar's word for anything. You do have a higher authority, assuming they're accredited. If they're not accredited, you're out of luck. But there is a higher authority that you can go to and try to dispute these things if you have a dispute with your registrar.
Absolutely,
so.
absolutely. Right. Good stuff there. Okay, thanks.
Another good story coming up.
Yeah, another good story coming up on the Department of Defense and counterfeit parts, which was written by our very own Ryan E. Day. Read, Subvert your own supply chain security in 5 easy steps. That appeared in Wednesday's issue of Quality Digest Daily. Again, that was written by our very own Ryan Day. And Ryan really took it upon himself to do what in my mind I consider really to be an investigative report here. Really, he dug into this thing pretty closely, and he looked at what the issues really are with counterfeit parts. And what we're talking about here is counterfeit electronic parts that are finding their way into defense systems, into the DoD's systems that we rely on for our national defense. Now, the DoD has undergone reports. They've issued investigations. They've issued new regulations, and all around this issue. And they all really revolve around one intractable part of this issue, which is that these are old and obsolete parts which are needed. These parts are needed as replacements for current defense systems, but
let's point out, because a lot of our current defense systems are really
old. That's right.
Exactly.
and they rely on these parts, and these parts in many cases are not being manufactured anymore. Now there's a supply of them, and they're available, but that supply is pretty rapidly being depleted. So what happens is suppliers then will, if they can't get their hands on a part that's needed and they have an order, to fill the order, many times there'll be a little bit of shady dealings that'll go on here, and many times it's in Asia, it's in China, and they will supply a part that is a counterfeit. It's a refurbished part, or it's a manufactured part,
or it is actually an outright old or fake part. In other words, it's marked as being one thing, but it isn't even that.
Right. Yeah.
I mean, kind of like your Gucci watch.
Exactly, my Gucci watch. That's right. But really the result of this is, and as Ryan points out, is that there's a lot of these inconsistencies, and a report that he cites at the beginning of his piece indicates that there were 1,800 incidences of counterfeit parts found, covering more than 1 million parts in defense systems.
In defense systems.
Yeah. that we're relying on this for our national
And by the way,
defense.
not just in stock,
Yeah.
but actually installed in equipment.
In equipment,
Yeah.
and this is a major issue. So ultimately, Ryan feels, he came to the conclusion that there's really 4 solutions to this. One is that we could rewrite regulations to allow refurbished parts and or the counterfeiters into the system. Bring them in, train them appropriately. They're already manufacturing stuff that kind of works,
Right.
So bring them in, make them suppliers, and bring them into the system. The second option is to begin producing these parts again in the United States. The third is to refit systems that are out there now, these old systems, with modern technology, basically rebuild or have new generations of these systems. The fourth would be the DoD putting their hands over their ears and going, la 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 la.
Right.
Now, 2 and 3, the second and third part of that I mentioned, the second one being produce these parts again in the U.S. And refit the systems with modern technology, neither one of those really is economically feasible. The reason why number 2 isn't feasible to produce them again in the United States is there's just not enough business. The startup cost to start a manufactory, a plant to do this is very high. And there's not a heck of a lot of business really there, because once you replace the stocks and you have all the outdated parts updated, there probably isn't a call for a lot of this going forward. So there's not a lot of incentive for anybody to build a plant to do this, to fulfill this need. So that's not really economically feasible. And the third one, to refit systems with modern technology, that's not really economically feasible either, because it's the DoD. I mean, we're talking about billions and billions and billions of dollars to update or to create whole new lines of these systems. So neither one of those really is feasible. Point 1, which is to rewrite the regs and let the counterfeiters into the system, that makes way too much sense. So that's not going to happen. I think again we're talking about the DoD here. That's not going to happen. And point 4, which is the la 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 la, that can be considered the current state. And if I know the government, I think I do, I would expect that current state to probably continue well into the future, because that's what's been going on here for a long time, for a couple of decades now. This has been an identified issue in the DoD back to 1990 or before. So again, this is something that is it's an issue. It's a problem. We're talking about the national defense, the U.S. national defense, and these aren't all missile systems and fighters. Some of these are more arcane, more kind of rudimentary, simpler systems. But they all count.
But there is actually work. Being done on this. And some of them actually skirting kind of the edges of some of those points is, we had, did we have Todd Kramer on the show?
We have not, we've talked to Todd Kramer, but
we haven't had it on the show. Okay. Todd Kramer works for a...
DAG is, oh gosh, I forget what the acronym is.
He's part of a group of people that are trying to help resolve this problem with the government. And part of what is going on is some of the old parts that are no longer being manufactured are being, if I have this right, relicensed, and fabs are starting to build some of these parts again. There's a whole process that has to go through with that. There are some laws going into place now that you have to have supply chain traceability so that anybody who buys a part will see the paper trail all the way back to the originator, because part of the problem has been some obfuscation over where did the parts actually come from, because there's so many steps in the procurement process, and the parts pass through so many hands that sometimes you don't really know where they've come from. It's not that everybody's a crook, but all it takes is a crook at the beginning, a halfway crook after that, and then it's lost in the noise. So
exactly right.
So a lot of, and actually we're going to be writing more on counterfeit parts coming up in the future. There's actually several different aspects of this. Okay, another actually lighthearted, funny story, yet with a serious aspect, was a story from Kimberly Egan. Kimberly Egan is a litigation and regulatory lawyer with a background in pharmaceutical and medical device litigation. Egan is also a blogger for AssureX. In her article, Save Us from Sprouts and Cilantro,
Save us.
Egan discusses the 547-page Food Safety and Modernization Act, much of which has to do with food safety, of course, with a focus on agriculture. And a lot of this because of, obviously in the news over the past several years, there's been all sorts of problems with contaminated food, either contaminated within a factory or contaminated out in the field. And when I say she discusses the article, I think I really should say she not discusses. I say she discusses the content of the Food Safety Act. She actually more disses it than discusses it. Here's an example recording this particular snippet from the Act, and this just gives you the kind of the tone. This is actually a quote from the Act. The statutes we describe above and previous interpretations of the concepts concepts of RACs, which is raw agricultural commodities, and processed food as set forth in the 1998 Joint EPA-FDA Policy Interpretation and the Antimicrobial Guidance, lead FDA to tentatively conclude that the basic purpose of farms is to produce racks, and that racks are the essential products of farms.
That's very logical.
Yes, that makes a lot of sense. And
farms produce food.
Farms produce food, and food is produced by farms.
You know, that's why people watch your show, because we give them the information that you can't find out anywhere else.
I tell you, and that is actually one of the things that Egan says. Basically, what her translation of that whole thing is, farms grow produce, and the produce is what farms grow, and that's what the FDA had to tell you in that about 500-word long sentence there.
I love the FDA.
For farmers, Egan says the entire 547 pages could be condensed to the following: wash your hands, clean your equipment, change your clothes if you just spent a bunch of time shoveling manure, don't put porta potties smack in the middle of your irrigation source, don't dump raw sewage in your fields, don't let dead things decompose in your fields, don't harvest rotten apples, and my favorite, don't bother with Purell. It really doesn't work on clods of dirt or manure. Seriously, though, Egan says that what is really missing, and what the FDA is really missing throughout this entire standard, or this entire act, is that they're missing the FDA is missing the entire point, which is that the FDA can't really do all this by itself. They can't really monitor all this by themselves. They can't really, administer this. They can't inspect it. It's just too big an issue. And the problem doesn't necessarily lie with the farmers. Mm-hmm. If we want to improve the safety of our food supply, Egan believes we need to do the following. Number one, figure out a way to keep pharmaceuticals out of the water supply. If they aren't in the water supply to begin with, they won't end up in our lettuce and cucumbers. Mm-hmm. Two, figure out a way to reduce our over-reliance on antibiotics.
That's a good one.
This is a good one. This is something that actually comes up quite a bit. We would be less susceptible to foodborne illnesses in the first place if we didn't, in Egan's words, routinely carpet bomb the flora in our bodies that keep us healthy. This actually is something that does actually come up in the news quite a bit, is because of our over-reliance on antibiotics and so forth, not only in our food, but actually just in our day-to-day lives. Mm-hmm. We kind of are subverting what our immune system wants to do on its own.
And we're creating things like MSRA, right, which are these runaway infections that are now immune to everything that we can throw at them. So.
Exactly. Number 3 on her list was figure out a way to prevent surface water runoff. Egan proposes that building codes require green roofs for all new commercial structures over a certain size, and that require green verges on all new roads. Now, I don't know about in other states, but we actually see that, at least in our county, mm-hmm. anytime you see a large new construction go up, let's say a Walmart, huge roof structure, huge parking lot. I don't know if you noticed by the distribution center up in Red Bluff, what do you see next to it? You see a catchment basin.
Oh, okay.
And what that does is all the runoff from the parking, all the runoff from the roof goes into kind of a private, not sewer system, but a water catchment basin, which is basically just a big lake that is nothing more than to catch that runoff so that it doesn't go into the nearby farms and fields, which actually happen to be around that Walmart distribution center. And that's basically what she's talking about there. You need a way to catch that stuff.
And that water is then used, of course, as the drinking water for Walmart employees.
Of course, yes.
Hey, of course, reuse it, right?
Yeah, got to do something with it. Another item she says is apply existing tort law to food producers who negligently or intentionally put a dangerous food product, raw or otherwise, into interstate commerce for biotech crops and hybrid seeds. This could include design defect and manufacturing defect claims, which can carry substantial financial penalties. The next one, take serious steps to increase agricultural biodiversity, which would include ending or seriously reducing subsidies for corn, wheat, and sugar, and encouraging effective crop rotation.
That's a tough one.
Yes, that's going to be a tough one.
That's going to be a tough one.
I don't see that one exactly sliding through Congress.
Yeah, that's going to be a difficult one. But
again, this is something that's been talked about a lot, is how food subsidies The farmers like it, and there's
Sure.
some, you could make arguments that it has benefited the country in some ways financially. But in terms of biodiversity, in terms of health, in terms of, some would argue if you're talking about corn products, in terms of obesity problems, because corn products are very, very cheap. And part of the reason they're cheap is because of corn subsidies. So you find all your snack foods and so forth are made from corn byproducts and so forth, which leads to leads to obesity. So you'll see a big argument come around things that subsidies cause. I don't see subsidies going away.
No.
But and finally, she says, solve the problem of migrant farm labor. We depend on undocumented workers to harvest our crops because it turns out that picking tomatoes is not really unskilled labor, as the recent example in Alabama shows. And she kind of links out to an article out here. Basically what she's saying in an upshot regarding migrant farm labor is a lot of people don't see it as being a skilled job. But it is. It is somewhat of a skilled job. You got to know what you're looking for. You got to be able to pick them. If you don't handle your migrant labor properly, and have a system to deal with even illegal aliens, if you just ban them outright, then what happened in Alabama, what she was talking about, is they left Alabama, including the illegals and illegals alike, went to Florida, which left with Alabama nobody to pick
their crops.
So it's not, what she's saying is it's not easy enough just to say, well, just eliminate migrant, illegal aliens. You need something that works actually a little bit better for the whole system. So basically, the upshot of what she is saying is a lot of what comes through the FDA and other laws are Band-Aids. They're not addressing the root cause. And this is something that we've talked about, Ryan talks about a lot. And matter of fact, is also part of what he talks about in his counterfeiting article. Laws have to make sense. They can't just be a Band-Aid. Somewhere along the line, you got to get to the root cause of what is causing the problem, whether it's counterfeiting, whether it's contamination in the food supply, whatever. Just slapping a law on top of it doesn't really take care of it.
And Kimberly Egan knows. She's an attorney.
And yes, exactly.
She has good insight, and we run stuff from her and the Insurance blog,
quite
a lot. So good stuff there. Okay, well, thanks, Dirk, for that. Thank you, Kimberly Egan. Thank you, everyone who wrote for us today. Thank you, Randy Dougherty, for being guest, and Ryan Day, of course, for giving us a great investigative report on the DoD. Before we go, I want to point out something we did yesterday, Dirk. A really great show called Gauging Quality, which we launched yesterday with yourself and Craig Howell. And we talked about surface plates, characterizing your surface plate and calibrating your surface plate. So check that out. It's actually on our website. You can see it on our homepage. You can go to the video tab, the top of our website, and check that out. Really good show, Dirk. I mean, if you missed it, check it out. This was a true geek fest, if I may.
Yes.
You and Craig really got into it, and Dirk, you impressed me with the trigonometry. Dirk went up on the chalkboard. He wrote up some trigonometry. I mean, the sine.
More than just a pretty face.
The angles, the sine, the arc seconds, the hypotenuse, which by the way, hypotenuse, I realized yesterday, it's actually not a large semi-aquatic mammal. It's trigonometry. It was fascinating.
Yes.
So check that out. That's on our website, again, under the video tab, Gauging Quality, and we'll be doing that every month, you and Craig, last Thursday of every month going forward. We're looking forward to doing a lot more of those coming up. And also, next week on this show, on QDL, I should say, we have Mike Micklewright in the studio with us. We're going to be talking about his document control article and a lot more.
That's right.
And Rob Bellinger of Olympus America with an interesting tech corner with Dirk, covering their latest microscopy technology for test and measurement. So make sure you mark your calendars and watch next week's show of QDL.
And real quick, because we're in overtime here, watch next week for Jeff Dewar's article. Jeff is the CEO of Quality Digest. His article, Helping Customers Define What They Want. Plus another great column from Don Wheeler. You all love him. So those are going to be coming up next week as well.
Check it out. Big week coming up next week, so join us then. So anyway, you all have a great weekend. We'll see you on Monday with QDD and next Friday with a big QDL week from today. So we'll see you then.
So long.
Bye.
Thank you.